Okay, hello, Erin. Nice to see you again.
Nice seeing you as well.
So I'm here today speaking with Erin Toussaint Jacques, who I first met several months ago when she was doing research on the impact of debate on elementary and middle school children. And I wanted to re-engage with her because I know she's done a lot between now and then. So Erin, nice to see you. Thanks for joining me. So first of all, I'll ask how you became interested in the impact of debate on elementary and middle school kids. How did that come to your attention?
I was really lucky. I had an opportunity to see middle school students debate at a local, it was a middle school that was in the metropolitan area. I'm in New York, so this school was in Queens. And I had been introduced to debate earlier by a colleague of mine who had done debate in high school and said, you know, you guys, you have an enrichment program for elementary students. You should really think about bringing this on for them. And I did. I brought it on, but in a very kind of really light way, because that's what you do with elementary students. And I liked it. I liked it. I probably would even say I loved it. Back then I would have said I loved it. But once I saw middle school, I mean, that love like just grew exponentially. Being able to see students in a tournament doing what they do in order to just be able to articulate their ideas and try to win someone's ballot, it was just a game changer for me. And I said, this is something that every student needs to have. So, not fast forward, but backtrack 2018, I'm in the Hunter Middle High School, it's called, in my area. And there's about hundreds of students. They're coming from all over the metropolitan area. So, and they're there on a Saturday. You know, Saturday is students' free time. You know, you get to do sports, you do all the things you want to do. You hang out and watch TV, whatever it is that you do that just makes you feel like you're relaxed. Hundreds of students are packed into this school for a speech and debate tournament. And the kinds of content that they were talking about, it was on the pharmaceutical industry and whether or not there should be price controls. And I was like, this is amazing that these kids from all different walks of life, diverse students from all kinds of backgrounds were here all day competing about this topic. And all I could think to myself is any student that does not have this is at such a disadvantage. You don't learn this stuff in school. Mm-hmm. I mean, the school hours, and it's no fault of the teacher, right? 6.5 hours, but there's but so much. And teachers and administrators are trying to prioritize a lot of stuff, right? But you're not getting this kind of stuff. You're not getting these kinds of topics. The students recently, they talked about Turkey and its membership into NATO. That was the most recent NSCA resolution. Wow. And that led them into so much information about Ukraine, right? Because it's always kind of like pressing new content with stuff that's relevant in the world.
And you're saying these students that were doing this on Turkey were middle school students?
Yes, this was just the most recent NSCA resolution. So when I say NSCA, I'm talking about the National Speech and Debate Association resolution. So I just thought any student who then has to now compete with their counterparts later on that had a hefty experience of speech and debate, what a disadvantage they're going to be at.
And you're saying compete not in a debate context, but in real life, in the real world.
Well, combination. I think debate is what you do in the real world. We have to communicate with everyone all the time. Whether you're communicating in academic spaces or you're in front of a lectern and you're giving a presentation. But most times we're communicating interpersonally with our friends, our family. We're trying to get our point across. We're trying to get people to hear everything that's happening in our head. We want to articulate that and for someone to understand it. And we want to be able to convey our ideas clearly. People are it's what we do as social beings. We communicate. So this is like the most absolutely best training for that. And what kids get out of it and what they feel internally, there's just no comparison. But yeah, so I had to see it firsthand. And when I saw it, I consider myself like an addict now. Speech and debate addict community. Because now I know that it exists, right? Because people get experience with this and that's it. They're connected.
Once you see it, you cannot go back. You know that there is no other way to reach that place but through debate.
Once you see it, you can't go back.
You said when you started, when you were first exposed to it, and I should have asked you this, were you teaching at that time? I mean, what were you doing that you saw it in that context?
Well, I have an enrichment program, so I had brought it to my elementary kids, but it was just basic, kind of like, do we argue about pizza versus hot dog? And it was very light. It was great skills for them. And then I had a lot of parents who were graduating out, right? The kids were graduating out, and parents move with their kids. And they asked me, can you take this at a higher level? Can you bring this at the middle school level? And that's because they had seen my passion in doing this for the elementary students, and they wanted this to continue. And I had some reservations at first, but then I went to a tournament with the idea of bringing our own students to compete at these middle school tournaments where they were competing on these resolutions. And I spent a Saturday there, and it was it. That was it. I said, everyone, this is a great equalizer. This is the thing.
Yeah, tell me, I love that. Tell me more about that as an equalizer. What do you mean by that?
There's so many disparities in terms of health and education. Just being able to have those kinds of skills to dissect information, convey ideas, to look at and examine real information versus mis or disinformation. That's debate, right? Being able to be culturally competent and see yourself in other people's shoes or relate to other people in different ways. This kind of the skills we need for life so that we can be functional, competent adults. Right? We talk about these 21st century skills. What are 21st century skills? Right? Some things are being automated. And so technology will be able to handle a lot of things for us, but those skills that we'll always need to be able to have, and those considered, I see as a higher level skills, is that ability to connect with other people, communicate, and really be able to maybe just galvanize a group towards a certain mission. Those skills are skills that speech and debate students have, right? And speech and debate adults will have.
Yes, and how do you think, I find this so interesting. How do you think debate teaches that? You talk about as an equalizer. How does debate reach kids across? What is it about debate that reaches kids across the board, no matter where they come from or what their background is, or even their level of success educationally? How do you think it does that?
I think it teaches them to be global citizens. Right? When you're in debate and you are learning about something that's happening a whole different part of the world, you're able to see things not just from your perspective, but you're able to see things from other people's perspective. Those kinds of skills, how are they taught? Maybe if you had immersion programs and you lived in different places, but how likely are you to be able to kind of travel all around the world like this? Debate it's a passport. It allows people to travel all over the world.
Oh, I love that.
And see things from other people's perspective. So, I am saddened when I look at the schools that have speech and debate and those that don't have speech and debate. And very often it is, again, it's in an issue of, we look at socioeconomic status and we look at race and ethnicity. And there's some great efforts that are being made by speech and debate leagues to make sure that inner city kids, in areas of low SES, racial ethnic minorities that maybe wouldn't have access to it, that they have access to it. But there's a lot of efforts that's being made to make that happen. I literally just did a research. I gathered data to look at the schools that had speech and debate in my area. And I did a comparison of public and private schools. And, it's probably no surprise to people who are in the community, but overwhelmingly, private school students had speech and debate at higher rates. And that wasn't just about whether or not they were private and public, but then the composition of who goes to those schools and who pays $40,000 a year for their children to attend school and those who do not. So there needs to be a wake-up call in the education system.
Yeah.
If we're trying to make sure that there's somewhat of a fair level playing field, we need to be able to speech and debate. Also, you can incorporate this in any single subject.
Right.
You think about like Common Core, and I know that's not the buzz thing anymore, Common Core. But the big piece about that is, even in math, it was like, communicate your ideas. Like, how would you get to that problem, right? that it's being able to take what you learned and explain it to another person and show that you really know this information.
No matter what the subject.
No matter what the subject. And students learn so much better like this. They retain the information so much better. They get excited about learning.
And when you say that speech and debate is at higher rates in private schools, are you saying it's being delivered more to private school students than it is, for example, in public schools or in lower SES schools?
They have it as part of their curriculum. It's in the curriculum. They either have it as an additional supplemental class, or they have it incorporated across the curriculum.
And so what do they know? Right? I mean, they obviously have information, and thinking about they have information that lets them know the value of this. I want to talk about the research that you've done. How did you decide to, or why did you decide to research this, and in what capacity did you present or conduct the research?
So I from the time that I was exposed to speech and debate, I've been really excited about it. And I was always perplexed. It's kind of like counterintuitive to me how other people in education spaces, and that's not to say all, but there are people in education spaces who didn't get excited about speech and debate. I couldn't understand it. So I wanted to research what the heck is happening. Because once you see this thing one time, everyone should just be like, we all want to do it. How do we make it happen? Because educators, and we're excited. And I know that, and I know so many educators who are doing it for the right reasons. They love it. They want to teach students. They want students to benefit. They want them to be like great adults. So people are very well intentioned, but still there's some pushback when it comes to speech and debate. So I just wanted to speak to speech and debate educators, in which I did. You were one of them, 25 educators across the country. And I was lucky because I was able to do it at a time where everyone was flexible and willing to get on Zoom.
Thank you, COVID.
Right? Yeah, with COVID. And I wanted to hear from them. One, what do they see as the benefits, and how do we, and what's some of the pushback? How do we make sure that this is open to people or students in all kinds of educational spaces? And I got some great information.
Tell me about it.
One, I say this word about me being an addict, but I realized that I was in a community of addicts.
Yes.
I would get off every call, and it was just like, like I would have tears to some extent about some of the stories that would be shared, right? And we could feel each other's passion, right? And that this is something that once you're in, you can't just pull out of. Like, you're committed to doing this, and you're committed to helping students make this happen.
Impact. Yeah, absolutely.
When it's in a for-profit or nonprofit world, you're trying to make this happen for students, and you're driven by this bigger mission. So that's one thing that I found out. And then it was like, well, let's have conversations about why is it just us? Do we have a vantage point that other people don't have? And that's exactly it. Consistently, we do have a vantage point that others don't have. So you hear about it. So someone will watch this video and go, oh, that sounds so nice. Speech and debate, we should probably incorporate that.
Yeah.
But seeing is believing is what I say. You need to be at the front line. And and it's not enough to be in the front line of other people. So you can go to a school and see students you don't know and see them competing. And you might say to yourself, they seem like they're just reading. I don't know how valuable this is.
Interesting.
Right? You need to see your own students, because everyone's baseline is different. You need to see your student's starting point and where they go next. Because for some students, they couldn't read before. Definitely couldn't read in front of a group of people.
Yes.
Some of the words, these multisyllabic words, getting it to come out of their mouth with fluidity was just, it's an amazing thing to see for some.
Absolutely.
Being able to understand the vocabulary that they're reading, because when questions are asked of them and they're fielding questions, that they comprehend it. It's like, oh my gosh, right? So you need to be able to see your own students. And I think that is a big, big deal of it. Because then you see the real value. So I would, you know, as an administrator of a school, I'd have all my teachers judge in debate tournaments. I think that would be like a you know, as much as I could make it mandatory.
That's the exposure that turns them on to it, that gets them to go, wow.
You need to see this. You need to see this happening. You need to feel that fire.
And so short of that, on a larger level, because you and I are both addicts, right? Yeah, on a larger level, how do you get administrators to understand? How do we explain? Is there any data? We know there's data for high school and college students and the tremendous impact it has, not only in grades and test scores, but in their actual future and happiness level. Is there anything quantified for elementary and middle school students that tells us about that, the impact on we've seen it with our eyes? Is there any studies or anything that shows that we can use to share with people, to share that data?
We can show studies of ELA and math scores and how they improve. There's some research that's done. But the big difference with speech and debate is the results aren't immediate. And that's something, that's information that we know it takes time, right, to see that. But what many educators were saying is that the turnover now for administrators is fast. You know, people don't stay in the job for 15 years and devote to school. Everyone's trying to move up that hierarchical ladder. So they'll stay here for 2 years and they're moving up to maybe they're an assistant and they move up to a principal and they're trying to go to a superintendent, but they're trying to constantly move up and they want to be able to show real impact.
Like test score impact.
They want to see, and it takes time to see that kind of impact with speech and debate. There's these social emotional skills. This is internal intrinsic rewards that students receive. There's so many things that are not so easily quantifiable. And in terms of their own career mobility, it may not be in their best interest to put all that heavy work in. And then their, you know, who comes next, who comes after them is the person that benefits from that.
I mean, I hear what you're saying. There are such immediate benefits. I mean, I've experienced a student participating in 12 weeks of debate, and it's visible to myself and my coaches who continue working with kids and seeing it so quickly. What are some of the more immediate benefits that you say come from debate? As an educator and as someone who's participated, like if you or participated as a debate instructor, what are some of the immediate benefits that we can tell teachers, okay, you do 12 weeks of debate and your students will be impacted in this way, almost across the board, almost to a person?
They'll be more confident. I'd say they'll be happier and they'll definitely be more resilient. No one comes into debate perfect, you know, or at the top, because when you're communicating information, particularly to judges, the audience is wide and it varies very much.
Yes.
The student may be a great speaker, but they didn't get to that lay judge because maybe they hit every single point, but they didn't connect with that judge in a way that mattered. They did not display confidence. They did not gesticulate in the way that they needed, you know. So there's a piece of listening to what other people say, but then also kind of watching the room and looking for nonverbal cues and really trying to connect with your audience. Debate teaches everyone how to get better in communication, wherever you are.
That's such a deep, subtle point. And I had a college debater who brought that up to me when I was asking him about how it's impacted him. And I'd forgotten until you just said it, the ability to specifically know your listener because of how they interact with you, how they look at you, the quiet clues. That's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. And you say it makes them happier. Tell me about that. With happy being obviously a huge word, but I know what you mean. And I'm asking you to.
You know, I think for everyone, we want our points to be heard. We want to be listened to. We want to make some kind of impact in other people's, in our own world, and make sure that the information we're trying to convey is conveyed in a way that's clear and gets some movement in our world. I think that the minute students start participating in speech and debate, they're more confident about being able to
Yes.
say, here's what my needs are, here are the things I'm having difficulty with. And it makes such a difference. And the way they walk in the world. So when I had someone say that, those aren't my words. It was one of the educators that I interviewed, and say, students walk in the world differently.
Wow.
And that's what it is. They walk in the world differently.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that. Like,
That's okay.
you
Sold. I'll
You
take it. Yeah.
it.
What were the final results of your research? What did you learn? If you could, squish it into a paragraph or a few sentences, what was the results of what you learned from your research?
There's so much, debate across the curriculum is huge. This idea of having people see it and participate in it to get them on board is big. Well, one of the things that really kind of resonated with me is this idea of being culturally competent because of debate, and bringing debate to students in a way that aligns with their own culture. So not trying to teach them how to speak like someone else, right? But to be authentic to their own voice and articulate in their own vernacular. And it was like, that was great. So, and these are the conversations I heard primarily among coaches that were teaching inner city students, right? And that they were told that they needed to sound a particular way.
Yes.
Sound smart. And they brought debate to them in ways that connected with them, identifying with their own music and the genre, whatever it is that they enjoy, and letting them know that it's about the clarity of communication, but you speak in a way that aligns or fits best with the person that you are.
Which goes straight back to your comment about who is your listener, and how do you bring the truth or your argument, no truth. How do you bring your perspective to your listener, right? I love that. And so you're communicating in the vernacular that fits your audience and your situation and feels right.
It feels right. And that you're authentic to yourself.
Yes.
Right? You're not trying to be anyone else. You're being your best self.
Right.
Right.
We talk about that a lot with our kids when we talk about the ability to present, and they think it must be this very vocal, loud, energized, a bright person in you. And sometimes the most passionate, wonderful debaters are gentle and direct. And so, yeah, bringing yourself is tremendously important. I love that.
Yeah.
Anything particularly counterintuitive that you discovered along the way? Or do you feel like it pretty much what you learned was consistent with what you believed before you started?
I think there was consistency.
Did you, in speaking to these educators, did you get a general sense of whether debate, I'll ask you, did you get a sense of whether debate is growing, is stagnant, what the perception is among educators at this time?
I think it's growing, but it's growing and leading to more disparity.
Oh, tell me about that.
Yeah, so I think the growth is among definitely private schools where there's more funding and resources, and parent communities who are really going to get behind this. And not to say that all parents aren't going to get behind this, right? But then if you so there's some speech and debate educators that I met, they were parents, right? They're parents that they're not working, they don't need to work. And this is what they do, and they support the speech and debate team in all the ways that they can. So the more resources, the more flexibility in terms of work schedule, the more discretionary time you have in the community, right? The combination of that's happening among parents and other people in the community, the more you can make this program really robust. It needs to have, what was the words that we used for that? But you need a certain amount of students before the energy is there. Right? So it's not enough to have like a 5-person debate team, because that will dwindle fairly easily. But you need like a minimum amount to get that fervor and that excitement. And then that then can permeate throughout the school.
So where does that start? With an excited educator, with an excited district leader? I mean, how do we do this? How do we bring this to a broader audience?
It has to start from the top. It has to start from the top, right? Because they need to be able to provide the support and funding. As one educator said to me, what I get, he said, pretty much what he gets paid for this is no comparison to what the sports coaches get paid.
Yes.
So where do we put the value? Are we putting the value in this sport? Because this is a sport. Kids get excited about it.
Yes.
This is a sport. So it's about where the value is placed.
So what next?
Where do you
go with this?
I'm going to be just focused on research to sound the alarm that this thing is out there. You guys want to know, how do we get our students to be 21st century leaders and amazing people? This is it. And that's where my efforts are going to be.
How are you going to do that?
And that's
I want on that train. How are you going to do that?
So I think I think it needs to be like a systematic approach, right? I think it needs to be, that's the right word. I think there needs to be a lot of hands in the pot. I think people need to be working from a lot of different angles to push this forward.
Yeah.
And the best thing I can think of that is in comparison to this is we think of emotional intelligence. This existed way before Daniel Goleman came out with his wonderful book on emotional intelligence. He had Mayer and Salovey who had introduced this idea, but it didn't stick. He comes out with this amazing book that's written in a way that lay people can understand it. It got excitement, bestseller, and it became a buzz thing, right? And now, almost any school you go to, someone's talking about social emotional skills.
Yes.
Debate is not here to kind of supplant that, but debate can also benefit students with social emotional skills, right? The psychological benefits of debate, emotional skill benefits of debate is absolutely clear. So there just needs to be, I don't say just needs to be, as if I have the answer, but I think people need to be working in angles that they can push the efforts best. For me, my background's on in speech and debate. I got introduced to this. I love it. So I'm going to be pushing it from a research end. People pushing it in other ends as well to get to that tipping point where it's like, oh my gosh,
it's ubiquitous. Do you not have debate? What? Like everybody.
Right, like you don't have debate.
What?
You don't know what's happening in what's important in educational spaces.
I know. You know what, Erin? I would almost argue that, I mean, I know that people bring debate in because of the impact it has on critical thinking skills and really even public speaking and the confidence it gives people. But I would almost argue that the social emotional learning from debate has a broader impact. I don't think there's one student. There may be a student whose critical thinking skills are somewhat impacted, or maybe they learn how to think more analytically, but there's not a single student that debate touches that does not grow social emotionally. I mean, would you agree with that?
I would agree. So many people have different types of social emotional programs. When you look at schools, they can easily bring this in to fit whatever metric or assessment students get for social emotional, and it'll hit the same markers. So they can have two with one. They can have the debate, all the other benefits of debate, and they can hit the social emotional. So if they have a social emotional program, or they need to meet those standards for social emotional, bring in debate.
Absolutely. I'm in.
Bring in debate.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I agree. I could look forward to continued work with you because we are both addicts and we want to bring, I am convinced that this is the way. I mean, this is going to make it in our world right now where we live, and with kids who are hungry for this greater, broader kind of learning. I don't see any other way, and I'm excited to continue to talk to you about this.
Hungry right now. I think if they didn't know that they were hungry for this, once they get a taste of it.
You're right.
Everyone is not competitive. Everyone doesn't want to go to competition.
No, I totally agree.
Their ideas. Everyone wants to be heard. That's what everybody wants. That's consistent.
Absolutely. And I will say to that 1,000%, because one of the first things in a debate program that you do is discuss. Before you even get to the level of formal debate and people going back and forth for 3 minutes or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever your presentation is, there are discussions and there are idea exchanges, and there's a requirement in a debate program, no matter which type of debate it is, that you listen and you consider different perspectives. So I agree. It's the talking and sharing that really is the first step.
And the earlier they start is the better. While I love it at the middle school level and I get to hear all this geopolitical content coming out of them, they won't be able to do that for most kids if they don't start earlier, because the earlier is just kind of, it's getting them into this idea that I have to articulate ideas in front of other people. Because by the time they get older, they have so much fear of social evaluation and scrutiny that they can't even begin to like think of trying to tackle something like that. The earlier they start, when they don't have as much reservation about the scrutiny, the better.
When they find out
the student to start, it's like, that's like so hard.
Yeah, when they find out they're not going to melt into the ground by actually saying something in front of somebody. And so what is that sweet spot? What do you think that age is?
Second, third grade. I think even second grade is just like, just talking about, did you hear what they said? What did they say? Can you repeat back what they said?
Yeah, that listening thing.
Just what did they say?
Yeah.
By third grade, they're definitely a little bit better at being able to do that. You can kind of really dive in a little bit more in third grade, but just very simple, easy topics, and it's all about logic, understanding, responding. Simple.
All right, good. Well, thank you so much for your time. Honestly, I hope I really want to maintain contact with you. I want to be here for you as you do research, and I want to be part of this growing community that we are all
I'm glad.
So attached to. Yeah. So
yeah, I love this. And you're in it for the long haul. I'm in it for the long haul too.
No doubt.
This is something that all of our kids need.
Yeah. So let's go.
I'm a humanitarian, so I think everyone has to have it. You know,
no doubt.
You know, rich or poor, it's just everyone has to have this.
No one does not benefit from it. So let's go save the world.
I have my kid on. You do too.
Okay.
All right.
Nice to see you, Erin. I'll be in touch.
All right, great. Thanks. I'm glad.
Thank you so much. Nice to see you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.